Right now is the perfect time to sell all of your running backs. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we are talking running backs and why you should sell all of your running backs or most of your running backs right now. And Kate, every once in a while, we'll get a scoop, an actual NFL scoop that will help us when it comes to our dynasty teams and our fantasy football teams. And one of the ones that I got a couple days ago, and it's twofold, right? But I was talking to, let's call him an NFL decision maker. And he said, he knows how much I hate the running back position. He said, get ready for the wildest running back draft of your life. And I said, oh, that's interesting. He said, yeah, there's going to be a lot of running backs drafted. Left it at that. Was talking to Dane Brugler from The Athletic on Twitter a couple days ago about a running back prospect that the Cowboys may or may not be interested in drafting inside the top 10.
Is his name Ashton? Is his name Ashton?
Yes. And I was making the case, hey, the Cowboys should wait until day 2 to grab a running back. And Dane replied back, there will be at least 12 running backs that are drafted on day 2 of this class. So if you think Ashton Genty is going in round 1, you have 12 running backs drafted on day 2. And then you look at some of the other rankings where there's potentially 20 to 22 players that have top 4 round grades. Kate, this could be the biggest influx of talent at the running back position that we've seen in years.
That's kind of scary. Because honestly, I thought the 2023 or 2024 draft class, like a little bit deeper than probably most gave it credit for.
This wasn't top heavy at all.
It wasn't top heavy, but I thought it was a deep class. I thought like we had players like Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, who I thought were very talented players falling into these deep rounds. So the fact that this is going to be a top heavy draft class, it's enough to make you sweat a little bit because I feel like there was like kind of a tide that turned this year at the running back position. There was the hashtag running backs don't matter movement, where everybody just kind of devalued the position. Then they got paid in 2024 free agency. This class got paid. And suddenly we've seen the running back position be one of the most like consistent forces. Everybody's like victory lapping about, you know, the Eagles paying Saquon Barkley, who could be playing his way into an MVP season. Like it feels like the narrative got flipped. So It sounds like what you're telling me is that anybody who doesn't have a Saquon Barkley-esque season or a bona fide starting position
or drafted one lately, right? They are all eligible to draft running backs. One more quick thing in this class. I was asking about Ollie Gordon, who is running back at Oklahoma State, who has not performed as well this year as I think a lot of people expected. I asked this decision maker, like, where do you have him? He said 4th round. I said, oh, okay. How would you compare him to last year's class? He said, well, right now he's our RB 17 in this class, and he would have been comparable to Trey Benson. So you're talking about the 17th running back in this class being valued or graded about the same as RB2 from last year.
Wow.
As you mentioned, Kate, like this is a class where even teams that don't need running backs are going to draft them because the talent is so good. Maybe they won't draft it in round 2, but in round 3. And I think there's teams across the NFL where you look at the running back situation and you might think it's pretty stable. but they get to round 3 and there's a guy that's just so much higher on their board. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of running back backfields next year get a lot murkier. And I think now is the time to trade those running backs, because when we get to April and May next year, and all of a sudden you have a backfield with Tyrone, Tracy, and a second-round pick at running back, it's going to be awfully hard to value Tyrone Tracy like we have been over the last couple of weeks.
That's scary because it feels like we just kind of got some of these sleepers. So let's talk about, like you mentioned, Tyrone Tracy. Let's talk about what teams are you thinking could be like surprise buyers here in the NFL draft? Like, are there any teams? I feel like there are some obvious teams that, like, okay, they don't necessarily have an answer at the running back. The Chargers, one of those teams, has, a couple players on 1-year contracts. They love to run the football. Like, they've been a screaming landing spot. The Dallas Cowboys been a screaming landing spot. But, like, who are some sleeper teams that could be in the running back market in this draft class that maybe we're not?
Well, I got a better idea how we can do this. I have the draft order right now via Tankathon. I want to go through every team, and you tell me if it's possible. I'm not saying likely, but possible they drafted running back in the top 3. Jacksonville. I'm not saying they will, but possible.
I mean, I think they need a running back, yes.
Yeah. Giants.
Yes.
Raiders.
Yes.
Patriots.
I'm
going to say yes, because Gibson's probably not going to be there next year, and I think they need another guy to pair with.
I think they need another running back. I think they feel good with their RB1, but yes, they need a complimentary back.
Carolina, I'm going to say no, so that's one no. Tennessee.
Yeah.
Okay. Jets, I'm going to say no on the Jets. Browns, yes.
Yes.
Saints.
Yes.
Bengals.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Chicago. I'm going to say no. We'll say no.
I think Roschon Johnson there is probably good enough.
Yeah. Colts, I'm going to say absolutely yes, because number one, they need a backup to Jonathan Taylor, and Taylor cannot stay healthy anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Dolphins, I'll say no, even though it wouldn't shock me at all. Tampa Bay, I'll say no, because they've got a pretty good backfield. Rams, I'd say no. 49ers, yes. Cardinals, maybe, depending on what happens with James Conner, right? Atlanta, no. Seattle, no. Washington, yes. I think Washington absolutely could. Houston, yes. Mixon is 28 years old. Denver wouldn't surprise me at all. Chargers, yes. Ravens, probably not. Steelers, yes, because Najee Harris is on the final year of his deal. Green Bay, probably not, because they signed Josh Jacobs. They drafted Marshawn Lloyd. Minnesota, yes. Philadelphia, no. Buffalo, probably not, but it wouldn't totally shock me in the 3rd round. Kansas City, yes. Detroit, no. That's only like 6 teams that we named, Kate, that we said are hard-nosed for drafting a running back inside the top 3. And I think that's the point. Like, every one of these teams outside of a handful are going to be in the running back market this coming up in this draft.
Whew, that's a lot of fantasy depth that we're going to be sweating out here over the next year.
Yeah, that's why any of the names that we mentioned, like, give me a team, Denver, right? Or Houston. I think Houston's a better example, right? Joe Mixon is having an awesome season. But what is it going to look like next year when he's another year older and maybe they add somebody into the backfield that's got a little bit more speed? I think now is the time to move those running backs. And Kate, we're going to go through a list of running backs that we think you should be trying to trade away right now. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. It's also the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. There's also a Thanksgiving free square. Tyreek Hill only needs to receive at least 0.5 receiving yards for the projection to hit. If you're correct at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. Download the Prize Pick app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. This episode is brought to you by Skylight Frames. Do you struggle to find the perfect gift during the holidays? Maybe gift giving isn't your love language. Maybe you just overthink it and you wind up with something disappointing, or maybe nothing at all. Or maybe you have someone in your life who is really hard to buy for, like my wife, who has no hobbies. She's impossible to buy for, but I got to tell you, I got her the perfect gift this year. I went with the Skylight Frames. She's absolutely going to love it. It is a touchscreen digital photo frame that your whole family is going to love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. Plus, there's seamless sharing. You can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email. It's a game changer. You could upload pictures onto the frame before you even open the box. It makes it a perfect gift for the holidays. And right now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That is skylightframe.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are discussing why you should be selling your running backs. And Kate, let's talk about some running backs that you think we should sell. Who are some of the first names that come to mind?
I think you hit the nail on the head with one of our first candidates to sell here. You mentioned a guy named Tyrone Tracy Jr., who has had some ups and downs, seemed to lose a little bit of ground here in week 12, back to Devin Singletary, who they made like a small investment for. We know he's Brian Dable's guy, but he's not Saquon Barkley, right? And I feel like the Giants are going to want to invest at the running back position. They obviously have plenty of holes to fill, but you have your star wide receiver. They need their star quarterback. But I think that if we're being totally honest, they're going to have a little psychological meltdown when it comes time for the draft, because I think what they're going to have in the back of their minds is that they didn't bring back Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley goes on to have an MVP-esque season, if not an MVP season. I feel like there's going to be some longing in there to fill the giant Saquon Barkley-sized hole that they're probably panging with regret right now for not bringing back and staking their franchise on Daniel Jones instead of him.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's also been some issues with Tyrone Tracy holding onto the ball. He's also going to be 26 next year, so it's not like I think it would be different if he was 21, 22. He's going to be an older player, and I think they want to bring in somebody that can maybe help move the chains a little bit more. I think Tracy is an unbelievable player that you can get in space and create long plays. But I don't necessarily know if he's the right back to give 22, 24 touches a game like they've been doing. I think they've been having to do it out of necessity. So I think that's a good call. I think another running back that fits that same mold, Kate, is Chase Brown for the Bengals. Chase Brown is a year 2 player who has gotten a lot of work this season for a couple of different reasons. Number one, the Bengals have been behind in a lot of games, and he's just the passing down back. Number two, Zach Moss is out for the season with a neck injury, and reading some of the reports, it doesn't seem like that's a great injury going on right now. And there's some questions about his long-term future. It's not the biggest need for the Bengals, But could I see them drafting a running back in round 3 to pair with Chase Brown? And all of a sudden, Chase Brown goes from RB 16 down to RB 24. I think that's very likely.
Yeah, and I think like when you think of Chase Brown, you look at him, he's a bigger back, right? Like he's got a big RB frame, 5'10, 211 pounds, but that doesn't necessarily mean his best skill set is being the bruising running back. He's
Yep.
a very explosive dude. Speed is actually his game, despite his size, which is what makes his game all the more impressive. But like, I think having him in a role where, you know, he's forced to have 20 plus touches a game isn't necessarily the best way to utilize that explosive playmaking ability. We've seen him be very productive as a receiver. I think if you have a guy that's more of the in between the tackles guy, that can be more of the complement to Chase Brown, that would be a really intriguing fit. And we know that, you know, I don't think the problems for this team are necessarily on offense, but I have a feeling they're going to want to support Joe Burrow in whatever way they possibly can. And the run game is an extension of that.
I'm going to give you another one that I think this is a perfect time to trade this player, and that's Isaiah Pacheco, who is coming back this week to play the Raiders. RB 17 in startup dynasty leagues. And I think now that he's coming back for this stretch haul, I think people are excited about Pacheco again, which makes it the perfect time to sell. We've already got some quotes from Matt Nagy that they would like to use both Kareem Hunt and Pacheco going forward. And why wouldn't you? Kareem Hunt is number 1 in the NFL in success rate, at least through the first 12 games of the season. And I just wonder, Kate, with Pacheco going into the final year of his contract in 2025, with his injury history, he's had a shoulder injury, knee injury, now a foot injury, and Kareem Hunt, obviously a free agent. If the Chiefs will spend a second or third round pick to maybe get somebody who is a little bit more dynamic that can help this rushing attack stay elite.
Marcus, how many times do you think Isaiah Pacheco has handled 20 plus carries in his career?
Probably like twice.
Twice.
Yeah.
How many times has Kareem Hunt done that for the Kansas City Chiefs this year?
Almost every game.
4.
Yeah.
So like that, I think, is probably, and I mean, they're different running backs, different running styles, but that fact like doesn't escape me, right? Like we've never seen Pacheco really take over, you know, the running game in a big way. 4 career games with 100 plus rushing yards. The ceiling hasn't been nearly as high as you would think for RB1 on the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Kareem Hunt comes in 4 games with 20 plus rush attempts, 1 plus rushing touchdown in each of those games. And I think the fact that, you know, we haven't seen Pacheco have a highly voluminous role, and then literally, I mean, homeboy steps off the plane and he is bona fide RB1. Come on, Kareem Hunt. Like, Kareem Hunt's been good, and he stepped off his couch. And they trusted him with a bigger workload than they trust Isaiah Pacheco. I don't think Isaiah Pacheco is going anywhere, but I think when you look at the health history, they've probably got to be thinking like, we just need to keep this dude healthy. Like, keep him on the field. Like, he's a tremendous asset whenever he has the ball in his hands, but he doesn't need to be the 20 carry guy, and he's never going to be the 20 carry guy. I think this is a great call to sell because, I mean, I've always thought he was a little bit overvalued. I know the idea of having the RB1 for the Kansas City Chiefs is a tantalizing fact, but the point is, they want the ball in Mahomes' hands when the game is on the line. They don't want to run it. But I mean, Pacheco's been valued generally throughout this offseason. Now the value's a little bit lower, RB17 on dynastyleaguefootball.com. But for most of the offseason, he has been like RB12, RB15, I think at one point as high as RB10. And that's rich for a guy that's never shown you that ceiling.
2 things here I wanted to mention. Number 1, great use of the word voluminous. I mean, just marvelous job by you. Number 2, it seems like Andy Reid throughout his coaching career has always had a receiving back that's maybe either been a full-time player or a part-time player. You could go all the way back to the Eagles when you had Brian Westbrook, who eventually became a full-time player. That was Jerick McKinnon for a long time in Kansas City. They drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire to be that. They don't really have that player on the roster right now. I think they were hoping Samaje Perine could be it. Kareem Hunt just doesn't give them any juice. I wouldn't be surprised, Kate, if that's the type of player they're looking for in the draft. Let Pacheco be the inside runner, but let's find somebody that can be a dynamic pass catcher that can run the screens, that can run option routes out of the backfield to give Mahomes another outlet. So I fully expect the Chiefs to draft a running back somewhere in the top 4 rounds. And once they do, that's going to take a massive hit on Isaiah Pacheco's value. So I think now is a good time to sell. Are there any running backs that are worth buying here in late November? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Now, I got to tell you, Week 13 is always my favorite in the NFL calendar. We've got 3 games on Thanksgiving. We've got a Black Friday game. We've got an awesome slate of Sunday games, including the Eagles and the Ravens, and then some primetime games with the 49ers and Bills. Now is the time to join FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. Available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kate, let's talk about running backs that you should buy. Usually, we say that every running back is a sell. But are there any running backs now as we get closer to the fantasy playoffs that you are considering a buy in your dynasty leagues?
I don't know if this is the name you're expecting here, Marcus, but we've got to talk about David Montgomery, who I've said time and time again, I think he's a little bit undervalued in terms of his dynasty value. We think of Jahmyr Gibbs as the RB1 in that offense. And spoiler alert, right now on Dynasty League Football, his ADP has him as the overall RB1 in all of Dynasty. But then I look at the gap between him and David Montgomery. David Montgomery right now being drafted behind Isaiah Pacheco, Chase Brown on average. David Montgomery, RB18, just ahead of players like Brian Robinson, Josh Jacobs. David Montgomery is firmly signed into the future of the Lions, signed a contract extension this offseason with the team through the 2027 season. And this team is abundantly committed to the run. This is a very high-powered offense who I think fantasy managers have been a little jilted by this year because we were so invested in the passing game that we forgot what Dan Campbell wanted to do all along is run the dang football. And David Montgomery, I think, is a crucial part of that we're very much underrated because he has been one of the best running backs in the NFL. And for fantasy, his ceiling has been so much higher than we give him credit for. Plus, he offers the stability of contract commitment. I think he's a good buy.
Yeah, I love that one. Again, you're not trading for David Montgomery with the idea that he's your RB1. But maybe you already have your RB2. Maybe you have Saquon Barkley, and you just want somebody behind Saquon that's going to give you week production. I think that's a really good buy. The other one, Kate, that you're having to pay up for this guy, but I'm willing to pay up for Bijan Robinson because Bijan is starting to get more work. They're phasing Tyler Algier out. I believe Tyler Algier still has 1 year left on his deal. So it doesn't really make sense for Atlanta to spend more draft capital on a running back. I think Bijan is probably the safest bet at the running back position outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, because he's 5 years younger than Saquon, 8 years younger than Derrick Henry. We like the offensive line. We like the offense in general. New offensive coordinator that's likely going to stay. I think Bijan is one of the running backs that I'd be willing to pay up for. But if there's a running back like down the list that if you want like an RB2 to help you finish out the season, I like Tony Pollard for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned David Montgomery. Just got a new contract this year. He's been getting a big workload. He's been producing. They have Tajay Spears on a rookie contract. Still 2 years left on that deal. It doesn't make sense for the Titans, who have so many needs, to invest another top 100 pick in a running back. I think Tony Pollard's a good buy right now.
I think that's a good take, not a great take, Marcus. I want to
You're not a Tony Pollard fan, though.
I'm a big Tony Pollard fan, but I'm a little bit shaken. I'm shooketh, you could say, about the fact that, like, yeah, Tony Pollard was getting a ton of work. We know Tajay Spears is a very talented running back in and of itself. Like, before we had an inkling that the Titans were going to be like the first team in this RB market, we were kind of all in on Tajay Spears because we really liked him. He's probably going to be a one contract player for that team, but a super efficient running back that offers a lot. But I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that Tony Pollard got a ton of work over the past few weeks. Tajay Spears dealing with injury, and their response was not like, we're going to ride this guy to the sun. It's, we need to get him fewer touches. Doesn't that scare you a little bit?
A little bit, because I mean, this is what's
at the running back position where touches are everything. That scares me.
He's still getting a pretty big workload, though. It's not like he's getting down to 8 or 9 touches a game, though, either.
That's not the case, but it does scare me that, like, I want my running backs to have my coaches thinking, I need to get him as many touches as possible, not the inverse.
I will say with Pollard, he's always been one of the league's most explosive backs, and whatever coaching staff he's been on, whether it's Memphis, Dallas, and now Tennessee, they always feel like, hey, if we can keep him around the 16 touch mark, that'll ensure that he remains explosive. To me, this is like the discount David Montgomery, because you're not paying RB18 prices, you're paying RB23 prices. And if you just want a solid RB2 for the remainder of the 2024 season and a running back that is going to be a factor in 2025, I just don't know how many of those guys are out there that are being valued after the top 20 running backs. And I think Tony Pollard is somebody that I want to continue to invest in.
I think that's fair. I want to close out the show with one more RB buy. Let me know what you're thinking about this. Bucky Irving, rookie running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were a team that we left off the list in segment 1 that could be in the RB market here in the upcoming draft class. Big part of that, we know, Rachaad White has been incredibly inefficient throughout his career, and Bucky Irving has been pretty darn good. Like, hard to, argue with the fact that every time I watched Bucky Irving from the moment, he stepped on the field early this season, I thought, wow, that looks good for Rachaad White. And then I realized it wasn't Rachaad White. It was Bucky Irving. Yeah. Like, he looks so much better. The tape tells you everything you need to know. Ranks 14th among running backs in fantasy points per opportunity. Even despite having Rachaad White there, who his calling card has been his receiving ability. Irving ranks 12th among running backs in total receptions, 15th in receiving yards. I think he's just doing so much with the little that he has. Ranks 6th in yards per touch, 3rd in juke rate. There's a lot to like about Bucky Irving and what he has done this year. And I do think that even though Todd Bowles, is quote unquote riding the hot hand, that hot hand seems to like ride and die with Bucky Irving.
That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Every day, we want to let you know that there will be a show coming out on Thursday on Thanksgiving. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to be discussing some potential landing spots for free agent quarterbacks in 2025. So make sure you download that podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It will also be available on YouTube. You can follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your Wednesday, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.